All right. All right, we're in history class. We're going to talk about mountain men. This is a handout. You guys will, that would be a add-on to one of your classroom work. You'll see the handout. Okay, read it. That's where the answers, homework questions come from. Okay. All right, going to start off talking about the reason there was mountain men. Okay, it was simply because of a hat fashion. Fur hats became very popular, okay? It was a fashion fad in Europe and America in the early 1800s. And this leads to the origin of the mountain men. Hats were made out of thick fur of beaver, okay? And they became very popular with wealthy men in Europe and America, okay? Companies traded with Indians for furs in exchange for knives, rifles, blankets, and other goods. Some companies then started hiring their own trappers and equipped them with the supplies they needed and sent them out to trap beavers in streams that was out in the far west, okay? Then you had others that served as, that they were independent, okay? They were just mountain men. They were self-employed, if you would, okay? They furnished all their own goods, and they went out and trapped beavers and would bring them into pellets and sell them at the end of the season, okay? Now, mountain men came from families of eastern farmers and merchants. They were children of pioneers, son of immigrants. Many were French-Canadian fur trappers, and they were called voyageurs. You had Indian tribes that trapped in Oregon. You had African Americans that roamed the Rockies. They even had native Hawaiians were recruited as trappers by trading companies. You just don't think about Hawaii being famous for trapping anything. You know, you think about it now as more of a paradise, but back in the early 1800s, it was very primitive, or more so primitive anyhow. Okay? Some mountain men, like Jedediah Smith, were very well read. And others, like Kit Carson and Jim Bridgers, couldn't read a word. Okay? A few were very successful businessmen, but most of the mountain men lived from one trapping season to the next, depending upon the price of the beaver pellet. Okay? Think about it. They don't need a lot of money. I mean, they're living off the land. A lot of times these guys are out there, they don't see another living soul for a whole year.
It's like trapping season, then it's like, it was like 4 months or something, depending on how long winter was.
Yep. Okay? So, mountain men were independent men. They usually worked alone, although sometimes they would team up, but most of the time they were alone. They paid for their own supplies, which of course were quite expensive, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. A trapper needed a good rifle for his protection, as well as a large knife and a tomahawk. He carried a possibles bag, and this bag is made out of buckskin, and it held sewing gear, cooking tools, and other personal possessions. Okay? Mountain men would use castor, which was an oily brown liquid musk that was taken from the glands of dead beavers. And they would spread this castor-like bait over their hidden traps, and it would attract beavers in. Okay? It's no different than if you deer hunt, you will use the scent of a doe to bring in a buck. Okay? Animals are attracted to the smell of the animals, so they are attracted. Okay? You can use certain scents from animals. Like coyote, you can use coyote scents to keep deer away from your garden, because if a deer picks up a coyote scent, it won't come down because it knows. Yes.
I was just gonna say, like beavers, whenever you trap them, like when they can actually, like, if you put that stuff like on your bait or wherever you put it, beavers would be attracted to it, because I think another beaver's in their territory, or if it's in the spring, they think that there's a female or something, and they'll come check it out.
Mating season. There's a number of different things. Animals march their territory
with their scent.
Yeah, with their scent in order to let other animals know
I live here.
that, yeah, this is mine, okay, this is where I'm at. Okay, you stay away. Okay, that's that's common, okay? Yeah, yeah, man kinda does it too. We call it fences. We put fences up around them, trying to keep everybody away. That's how we mark their territory.
Call that on a
Okay.
home.
All right. If we get smelling too bad, it's not marking your territory, it's like pushing you out the door, trying to get you to take a bath, okay? So- All right, mountain men usually dress like their Native American neighbors. They wore rugged buckskin shirts, leggings, moccasins, and these clothes were warm and durable, okay? Many mountain men also wore extremely distinctive hats. So they all dressed pretty much alike. Okay, except for their hats. And sometimes they would take it and they would take bird feathers, things like that, and decorate their hats up and that was very distinctive. That was them trying to just have a little bit of individuality. No different than you guys having to wear your uniform, but you might wear a little bit more decorative belt sometime, or your socks might be a little different than And you're just trying to show your individuality, but still play the game. Okay? So that's kind of what they did too. Yes.
It was kind of like kindergartner crafts, decorating the hat,
Okay?
I guess.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Okay? Now, they did have this thing that they would refer to as the rendezvous. Fur companies would organize places for the trappers to meet and trade their beaver pellets, okay? And they would trade them for supplies, gold, other things that they needed. These yearly events were called a rendezvous, and it's a French word meaning appointment, okay? Mountain men lived and trapped by themselves for a year, and they loved the rendezvous because they could talk to the others. They could tell stories, and I'm sure there were some tall tales being told. They gambled. They competed in contests, shooting events, horse races, all kinds of things like that. And this went on for a few days, and then they bought their goods,
And went back.
and then they went back on their own way, back out into the mountains to trap for another year. Okay? So the trappers would sell their pellets to a trading company for prices that varied from $4 to $9 a piece, depending on how good the trapping season was. If there wasn't a whole lot of beaver pellets being bought in, the price went up. Okay? If there was an overabundant, that drove the price down.
Yeah, because then there's so many
Yeah.
that they don't really.
Okay?
Like $4 to $9, that's $9 back then was a lot.
That's a lot of money.
That's like
They
nowadays.
often had several hundred pellets. Okay, so they were making some money. But here's the deal. The companies that sold them the supplies, such as coffee, sugar, tobacco, everything, ammo, everything that they needed perhaps, okay, new knife, whatever they might need, would sell it to them for prices 10 to 20 times higher than they could have got it back east.
Only reason they did, because everyone out east knows the price. They're with other people. They didn't know what the price was out east. So.
Well, and not just that, but they're kind of a captive. It's kind of like if everybody in this room had to have a number 2 pencil, and I'm the only guy in town that sells number 2 pencils,
You're gonna sell.
I can charge what I want because you gotta buy it. Right? I'm the only game in town. Now, if competition moves in, now the price starts going down. These guys didn't have, the people who ran these trading posts didn't have competition for hundreds of miles away. So, and they're doing the same thing. Yes, sir.
Yeah, and then because the prices go down, it's bad for the business.
Yep. And if, and what they charged for the goods was based on how much a pellet was worth. If they would get $9 a pellet, then I'm sure a pound of coffee was up here. If they were getting $1 a pellet, coffee's price was down here, So it kind of ran it like that. Yes, sir.
And so that's why people who had their own supplies were better off.
Oh, yeah, yep.
It's like they could like, they didn't have to pay ridiculous
They could
prices
sell
for
them.
that.
They
So, like,
could-
if they-
Well,
They
and you
said-
gotta understand, they didn't need a lot, I mean, other, like I say, coffee, sugar, tobacco, a few things like that, they lived off the land for the most part. You know, so they didn't need a whole lot of supplies, but
Need some.
what they did need was expensive, yes.
So like it says that the trappers sold their pallets to the trading company for about like $9. But that was like 20 times. And it was like for like one pallet you would have to buy like $180.
Possible. All right, the end of the era, though. The first rendezvous was held in the early 1820s, and the last one was in 1840. So it was a little bit less than 20 years that the Mountain Men saga actually lasted.
That's because it was
Okay?
a harsh life.
Yep, it was. The fashions demand of the time changed, and beaver hats went out of style. Okay? Mountain men could no longer make a living trapping beavers. But they were resilient men, and they had endured terrible winters, harsh conditions in the wild, as well as brutal battles with man and animals. They had traveled and mapped large sections of the West in their minds, if not always on paper. Mountain men sometimes lived with Indian tribes. Many died because of their dangerous occupation, you can imagine. Others became guides for government explorers or wagon trains. Some of the most famous mountain men are described on the following pages. We're going to talk about some of them. Yes, sir.
So 20 years for a fashion style
Yeah,
is like
that's a long time.
lot compared to what it might be today. Like today.
Yep, yep,
Because today the fashion styles go by really quickly.
Yes.
yep, yep. You're talking about how long the fashion style
It's-
lasted
now
for the
it's
hat.
focused
20 years
square.
is a long time.
No more polka
Yeah.
dot.
Yes,
That's
Julia.
so 30 minutes ago.
Yep. Yes, sorry.
I was just gonna say,
All
like,
right, stop.
there is
Stop.
still some, there's still some trappers today, but they're not like, they still live in cabins and stuff, but usually they trap what they can. And like, usually like the buyers, they're not just buying them to make them and stuff, like they buy like tons of them at a time to make like big
Oh, yeah.
things, like big, like raccoon blankets and like
Yep.
stuff like that.
Yep. That's talking about there is still modern day trappers.
And taxidermies too, that's,
Oh, yeah. All right, now we're going to talk about some of the
Okay.
mountain men of the era, some of the more famous ones. Okay, you had Joe Meek, went west at the age of 19. He became a trapper. He fought the Blackfoot, the Bangkok Indian tribes. He married a Nez Perce girl. That was yet another Indian tribe of the era. In his search for new beaver streams, he traveled the length of the Rocky Mountains from Canada down to Mexico and as far west as California. He
what?
froze, he starved, he sometimes ate ants and grasshoppers. He even had to eat the soles of his own shoes at one point. Eventually, he settles in Oregon with his wife and his children. And that kind of shows you how hard
so
life
bad
can be.
from eating the
Yes,
bottom
Parker.
of his shoes.
Alright, tell everybody else.
I'm sorry, I called on Parker. I don't need to hear from anyone else right now.
Battle himself versus Indian tribes, like 20 people.
No, there was more than just him. Like, there a bunch of pioneers and like people that
Like,
like him. So like,
it's just talking about him, so.
yeah, I know, but he was in the battle. He didn't fight. Not
Oh,
him
yeah,
personally. Didn't fight a whole Indian.
He was out in the woods
Yeah.
because
If you fought it,
All
like,
right.
if you did that, he would be alive.
John Coulter.
I don't know.
He was actually a member of the, you might have heard his name before. He was a member of the Lewis and Clark expedition. He was one of their guides. But he actually asked permission to leave before they have completed their journey
So he can.
so that he can become a mountain man or a trapper, okay? And they give him permission. So he wanders wildly and explores the Yellowstone area. Okay, he's one of the first ones up in the Yellowstone area. And although his fellow trappers thought he was lying when he would tell stories about water and steam bubbling up out of the land, coming up out of the ground,
Yellowstone
and
Springs.
smoking mud.
That's
Okay,
the
talking about the geysers in Yellowstone is what he was talking about, and no one believed him. They thought he was lying. Okay, They referred to it as Coulter's hell because they thought he was lying. Okay? He was captured. Now this is good. He was captured by the Blackfoot Indians because they were very defensive. They didn't like him being on what was their land, what they considered their land, their hunting land. Okay? And they decided to have him run the gauntlet.
Oh,
Okay? Now, a gauntlet is when you got a row of your braves, you got braves on both
Yeah,
sides,
and you got
and they've
clubs.
got clubs.
and sticks and stuff.
Wait, what do
And
you mean
he
brains?
starts
What
on
do you mean
one
brains?
end, and he runs through it,
Mountain.
and they are trying to beat him to death, is what they're doing. This is not just little touts.
If you make it through
They're
alive,
literally trying to beat this guy to death as he comes through the
They were
line.
like doing with
Okay?
over my leg.
Okay, and if he actually made it through the other end, they would chase him down and catch him and kill him then. So you're not going to survive this. Okay. He surprised his captors with his speed and agility. Okay, he dashes through the gauntlet, running away with the braves in hot pursuit. Okay, one of them actually catches him down near the Jefferson River, and they fight, and Coulter actually kills him. And as others are approaching, he dives into the river. Okay? And
the trapper.
he has spotted a beaver house, okay, a beaver down, which if you've ever seen one of these, the door to it is underwater, but when you come up in it, it actually sits above the water.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
actually
That's
ground.
how beavers make it.
So he actually went up and went into that beaver, which I guess fortunately for him, there was no beavers in there because they would not have been a real welcoming to him, I wouldn't think. But this is where he spends the rest of the day. So he escapes and gets up in this thing, and then at night he comes out and he goes slips out into the river, and he walks 300 miles over 7 days to Fort Lisa
That's a
near
lot.
Oklahoma, near Omaha, Nebraska. Out there. So he was out in that
That
area.
guy's pretty legit.
Okay. So that's a pretty good story because you know he was beat up pretty good. Yes.
Like the Blackfoot Indians, like and like all the Indians, like all of them would do like different types of gauntlets, and sometimes if they had a prisoner, they'd like get the gauntlet going, and if they made it through alive, they'd let them go.
Yep.
But if they wouldn't, then they couldn't, or they'd let them, or they'd like either kill them or say, if you get through it, we'll let you stay alive, but you have to leave, or else we'll kill you next time we see you.
Yeah. Talking about not every Indian tribe hunted them down and killed them after if they did make it through. If you actually could survive the gauntlet, then they would basically tell you you needed to leave their land, but they let you live. Okay, and that is very true. Okay. All right, Jedediah Smith. He was brought up in the eastern United States. As a young man, he became a very skilled hunter and woodsman. He read the journals of Lewis and Clark, and it fascinated him, the being out like that. And he was anxious to see these lands and explore them himself. Okay, he was an unusual mountain man. He was very quiet, and he listened. He carried a Bible. He was well read. He read a lot of books. Okay, remember a lot of these guys couldn't read at all, and here he is. He's well read. He read all the time. One of his earliest adventures as a fur trapper, he was attacked by a grizzly bear, and of course the grizzly bear mauled him and actually had his head in its jaw. Somehow, I don't know if another trapper shoots it or whatever, but he's able to escape. But it rips his ear off. And I love the fact that it talks about another trapper sewed Smith's ear back on and treated his wounds.
That's some serious wound.
That's a serious, sewing someone's ear back on. It probably wasn't ripped completely off. It was probably dangling pretty good.
Plus, they also
Hopefully
got
they put it back on a little
Which
straighter.
deer, if you provoke them, are pretty vicious
Okay.
and
Wait,
can easily
what is
kill
this?
you.
Yeah,
So,
because they're.
It must have been some
It just-
secret.
Yeah, because here, this is just the canal that helps funnel the sound in.
Kinda is like I feel like that's.
You would hear not as good, but
All right.
it's still.
Smith explores more of the West than any man in his time. He explored the South Pass, the best route through the Rocky Mountains. He traveled through the Yellowstone area, across the Rockies, along the Plate, Snake, and Columbia River, across the deserts of Nevada, the length of California and Oregon, among many other travels. He kept journals and maps, but he was killed before he could complete them.
By who?
Indians. He is being chased by Indians, and he comes across this like a little cave area, and he runs into it, and he keeps going, and it's getting more narrow and more narrow, and it gets to the point that he is crawling through it, and he can see daylight at the end, and he's crawling through, and he's crawling through, and he's crawling through, and he comes out the other end,
And guess who's in?
and guess who's waiting for him?
Because the Indians live there. They know what that cave
Yep,
is.
they knew where it came out, so they was waiting on him. Okay?
They get
Jim Beckworth was actually a black mountain man who lived with the Crow Indians for many years. He fought with them against their enemies, the Blackfoot and the Cheyenne. He had several Indian wives. He was a very important chief and tribal advisor. He was a very successful fur trapper who tried to steer the energies of the Crow people into trapping instead of trading trapping and trading rather than constant warfare with the Cheyenne and people of that nature. But it didn't work out too well. Now this is the guy, if you saw the movie with Leo in it, not you, but
I know I'm a hard actor.
okay, this is what it was based on. It was based on Hugh Glass's life. Okay, hold on, let me finish it. Hugh Glass was possibly the toughest mountain man of them all. Okay, he fought a grizzly bear with a Bowie knife.
What the what?
A bone.
Bowie,
Same.
big old knife.
Like a machine.
Okay, it's kind of like a machete. Yeah, we consider it a machete today. Not quite that long, but it's
But-
big.
Close enough.
He was tore to pieces, surprise, surprise, and knocked unconscious. Two trappers had agreed to stay with him until he died, okay, because they were pretty sure he was going to die from his injuries.
But that was what.
But they became frightened by the possibility of hostile Indian attacks. So they took all of his stuff, his rifle, his knives, any food he might have had, any supplies he might have had. They took it and left him to die.
Oh, I've seen this.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a movie about
Yes,
it.
I
There's
know.
a movie
Yes,
about
there
it.
is. Yes, there is.
I
If
watched
only
the
someone had
movie.
listed that, it's
Yeah,
on
yeah.
Please
That's
stop
what he
yelling.
said.
Yep. Okay? He finally wakes up and he crawled down to the river. Okay? He's eating parts of bisons that had been killed by wolves. So this is not cooked meat here. We're eating raw meat. He's eating other dead animals that he is finding, roots, anything he can find. And then he begins a 200-mile journey, walking and crawling across the plains to Fort Kiowa. He then hunts down the trappers who had abandoned him, and you would think he would have killed them, but he didn't. Okay? And one of the ones that had left him was a guy named Jim Bridgers, and he goes on to become one of a very famous, well-respected mountain man.
And that's the next.
Boy, how did he know that that there were trappers there?
And how did he figure out that it was them?
He was with them when he was attacked.
Ah.
They were with him.
Yeah, they were gonna sit with him until he
Yeah,
died.
they were with
No,
him.
I
They
thought
were gonna stay
they
with
just like so happened to come across.
him. No.
In this article I read about him, it said that when he found him, he broke in and was about to kill him with a knife and said, "I would kill you, but I don't want to get the blood of you on my shirt," and then just walked out and
Yep.
never saw him.
Well, you got to figure he was pretty upset. I mean, the idea was they were going to stay with him, so when he died, they would bury him to keep him, probably to keep wild animals from eating him. Okay.
Then
But
they got
it was one thing. Not only did they go off and leave him,
They took his belongings.
but they took everything he owned. Now, I grant you, in their mind, he's not going to need it. But in his mind, he survived. It would have been nice to have his supplies with him, you know? So you kind of see both points. I can see where he would have been upset. Anyway, Jim Bridger was a very young and inexperienced trapper when he left Hugh Glass to die. He went on to become the best known of the mountain men. He was respected by the many people he guided through the West, including army units, wagon trains. Bridger could not read his own name, but he could draw very detailed maps of every area he had ever explored. He traveled widely through the Rocky Mountains. He was the first white trapper to discover the Great Salt Lake. Does anybody know where the Great Salt Lakes are?
Utah, because
He couldn't spell
Utah. Thank you.
Isn't that the capital?
Yeah.
Yeah, Salt Lake City.
Great Salt Lake City.
Like,
All right, he ran a trading company until the market for beaver pellets ended. He built his own fort along the Oregon Trail, which we're going to talk about later. He mapped the best route for the Union Pacific Railroad through the Rocky Mountains. So he did a lot of stuff. Now, Kit Carson, when he was 16, Carson ran away from the saddle making shop where he had been an apprentice. Okay? He worked on traders' wagon trains on the Santa Fe Trail until he made enough money to outfit himself and become a beaver trapper in the Rocky Mountains. He became a skilled trapper and explorer. He married an Arapaho girl, that's another Indian tribe. And after her death, he married a Cheyenne woman. Okay? Both tribes respected his courage and his honor. And he went on to become the chief guide for the John C. Fremont mapping expedition in the 1840s. He was later an Indian agent because he was trusted by the Native Americans. Okay, so he kind of worked for the U.S. government to be a go-between between the Indian tribes and the government. Okay, so that's how he ended up living the rest of his life. All right. Okay, thanks a lot, and we'll talk to you later.